Following the conclusion of Season 2, the third season of The Diplomat begins with a bang. When we last saw Kate Weiler, she was discussing her own ambition to become vice president and addressing Vice President Grace Penn about her involvement with HMS Courageous. But here's the twist. Unbeknownst to her, Hal, her husband, calls the White House and speaks with President Rayburn directly, telling him everything about Grace's treachery. Hal didn't think the news about his vice president would kill him, but he did know it would have a massive impact on the president. And unfortunately, the news does exactly that. With Grace taking over as president following Rayburn's death, Kate's and the nation's futures are now in serious jeopardy. Season 3 recap. Even though they are rivals, Kate is surprisingly supportive of Grace when she becomes president. She wants Grace's favor now, partly because she understands that Grace needs a level-headed deputy to keep her from making the kinds of disastrous choices that led to the HMS Courageous incident. Everyone believes Kate is the most qualified candidate for the vice president position, but Grace shocks everyone by proposing Hal instead. Kate is devastated by this decision, but she pulls herself together, especially now that she knows Hal will need all the help he can get. He's also taken aback by his nomination, and he assures Kate that he'll secure her a position worthy of her talents. And he does fulfill his promise, but Kate isn't ready to leave London just yet. So she decides to balance her duties as both the second lady and an ambassador. This puts a lot of physical distance between her and Hal, but since they're already emotionally distant, it seems like the right move for them to be on different continents. They both agree to maintain the appearance of a happy marriage for public perception, but personally, they're not together. Back in London, Kate resumes her role as ambassador, where she meets Callum Ellis, a British spy. He informs her that there's a Russian nuclear submarine off the coast of Britain that needs to be dealt with. Interestingly, he comes to Kate with this information first, and now they're working together to resolve the crisis. As they collaborate on the project, they develop a romantic relationship that they try to keep hidden from everyone else. Meanwhile, things get even more complicated when a Russian source threatens to expose the secrets of HMS Courageous. Eliminating this problem becomes a mistake that could cost the nation everything. But Kate, with her endless supply of wit and strategic thinking, devises a brilliant plan. What she doesn't realize until much later is that Hal had manipulated her into doing something that would have catastrophic consequences for both the nation and herself. Does Trowbridge accept Grace's assistance? Like all Brits, Nicol Trowbridge was furious and horrified by the attack on HMS Courageous, which had been a defining moment of his administration. He put every effort into holding the guilty party accountable. When he learned that Margaret Roylan, who had served as both his confidant and mentor over the years, was complicit, he decided to have her assassinated. Roylan's suicide prevented that from happening, but it shows just how deep Trowbridge's rage runs. Then the Americans inform him that Roylan had worked with the late President Rayburn. They also ask him to exclude Rayburn's name from the public narrative and place all the blame on Roylan, at least initially. This completely destroys Trowbridge's faith in his American counterparts. He feels betrayed by them, especially after learning that they'd known about this for a while, but only disclosed it after being pressured by the Russians. So Trowbridge tells the truth about Rayburn during the press conference and cuts off all contact with the Americans. When they inform him that there's a nuclear submarine carrying the notorious Poseidon weapon just a few miles off the British coast, he doesn't trust them. Their credibility has been so damaged that he thinks Poseidon is a myth, though he does acknowledge the submarine part. Since he still needs someone's technology to deal with the sub, he turns to the Chinese instead. This alarms the Americans because they know it would give China access to Poseidon. Finally, in an attempt to change Trowbridge's mind, Grace offers America's help in getting rid of Poseidon without causing any problems for the United Kingdom. He refuses to work with them and holds his ground. But after seeing concrete evidence of Poseidon's existence, he finally agrees that the Chinese should not be allowed anywhere near it. However, he also doesn't want the Americans to have it either. At this point, Hal and Kate suggest the concept of the Runit Dome. Basically, bury Poseidon in concrete at the bottom of the ocean rather than giving it to anyone. Trowbridge likes this idea and agrees to a ceasefire. How did Poseidon fare? Who got it? For several years, the story of Poseidon had circulated among intelligence agencies, but it wasn't taken seriously. So when the Americans tell Trowbridge about it, he thinks it's just another story they're making up to seem essential to the UK. To prove it's real, Kate proposes sending a drone to the ocean floor to capture images of Poseidon. It would be clearly visible in the photos because of its distinctive hull, and once Trowbridge sees the danger is real, he'd never consider going to the Chinese again. The problem? It could be interpreted as an act of war, forcing the US Navy to enter UK waters without authorization. But they have to take the risk. Once Poseidon's existence is confirmed, Trowbridge would be too busy dealing with the nuclear threat to criticize America for deploying ships into UK waters. The plan works. When Trowbridge sees the images on his desk, he immediately reconsiders his plan to go to China. Kate offers him the option to let the weapon rot at the bottom of the ocean, because no one should have that kind of power. For a moment, everything seems fine as he considers her proposal. But just as everyone is ready to celebrate, Callum informs Kate that Poseidon has disappeared. The radioactive readings in the area have drastically decreased, which only happens if one of the two devices has been removed. This is deeply concerning, especially if it means the Russians have taken it. Kate immediately tells Hal, and Hal speaks with Grace. While the president and her vice president are deep in conversation, Grace's husband Todd asks Kate if she's okay with Hal and Grace's successful and perhaps strangely close professional relationship. At first, Kate brushes off his concerns, thinking he's suggesting a romantic affair, but then she realizes it goes beyond that. They're not secret lovers, they're co-conspirators, and that's worse because it means they're the ones who took Poseidon. She confronts Hal immediately, pointing out that Grace told Trowbridge they used drones to get the proof, but she actually sent a submarine to capture the images. Combined with the suspicious timing of Poseidon's disappearance, Hal admits they were responsible. And now Kate can't tell anyone that America has Poseidon. Will Hal and Kate reconcile? Does she end things with Callum? Earlier in the season, when Grace was reconsidering Hal's appointment as vice president, Kate told her that Hal frequently surprises her at the most unexpected times. It was meant as a compliment, but when the truth about Poseidon comes out at the end, it's demonstrated in the most unflattering way possible. Kate is certain that Hal came up with the plan to steal the weapon from right under Trowbridge's nose. He would have marketed it as insurance in case the British Prime Minister continued refusing to work with them. The Americans wouldn't have to worry about anything because Poseidon would no longer be in Chinese hands. And if Trowbridge accepted the olive branch, the gap between the two nations would be closed. Of course, because he's Hal, he doesn't pause to consider the consequences of his actions. He doesn't think about what will happen when the British eventually find out. Grace had hoped that no one would learn about HMS Courageous, but the truth, or at least part of it, came out despite every attempt to hide it or shift the blame. So what happens when Trowbridge discovers that the Americans have deceived them again while claiming to help? Kate realizes that once again, she trusted Hal too much and temporarily forgot about his flaws. Just minutes before discovering his betrayal, Kate had actually reconciled with him, expressing regret for her affair with Callum and saying she wanted them to be together. Hal embraced her when she said she wanted to try again. But then Callum appears, and just as Kate is presumably about to end their relationship, he tells her about Poseidon. Everything falls apart again. Hal has shattered her trust once more in the most devastating way. Just when she felt she could love him again, he did something so incredibly reckless that she has to reevaluate everything, including their marriage. So even though she might have chosen Hal over Callum, their path forward won't be easy at all. And she hasn't officially ended things with Callum yet. Considering Hal's behavior, She might end up turning to Callum for comfort and some sanity after all. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, make sure to like and subscribe for more.